There are some people who are simply born to write songs. Some of us develop the skill. Many of us develop the skill. We work at it. Honestly, pretty much anybody who ever wrote even one halfway decent song probably had to work at it and work hard at it. It's a muscle. It's a craft. There are techniques. But some people are simply born to do it. Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. Songs quite literally move through people. Songwriters often describe the experience of feeling a song coming through them as they write it, as if it wasn't coming from them, but rather using the writer as a conduit. And maybe so. And songs travel through listeners, too, like a virus, really. Catchy melodies are referred to sometimes as earworms that burrow into your head. Some people think of music as a form of medicine, of healing that moves from soul to soul. But people also move through music. For many of us who devote our lives to making, playing, or even listening to music, we are transformed through that experience. Music becomes a way of traveling through the world. Songs, in that way, are a mode of transportation. And for Beth Nielsen Chapman, I think that's certainly the case. She's a songwriter's songwriter. She's in the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. She won 2 Grammys and a CMA Song of the Year award for co-writing Faith Hill's hit song, This Kiss. Since getting her start as a professional songwriter when she was still a teenager, she's written songs performed by numerous artists, including Martina McBride, Willie Nelson, Tanya Tucker, Mary Chapin Carpenter, Crystal Gayle, Juice Newton, Bette Midler, and more. So given that's the company she keeps, it may come as little surprise that she's spent much of her life in Nashville. But she's also a solo artist whose personal career has been a little harder to define or to contain. Bonnie Raitt, Amy Grant, John Prine, Michael McDonald, Emmylou Harris, Paul Carrack, and Vince Gill have all been featured performers on her solo records. She's made 16 of them, in fact. Crazy Town came out recently.
I don't ever look back. I just want to feel this moment. Follow where it's going, baby. I don't ever look back. That's just dancing with the past.
Beth's personal journey has also involved more than her fair share of loss. Her husband, Ernest, died of cancer in 1994. Then a few years later, she experienced her own battle with breast cancer. She eventually got married again to a psychologist and photographer named Bob Sherman. And we met at the end of last year in late 2022, just days after Bob himself had died of leukemia. But Beth has channeled many of those losses and her successes, her life experiences in general, into her work. The songs have often moved through her, and she has, in turn, moved through them. This, my friends, is a really special conversation. Third-story.com is a place to go to sign up, subscribe, join the mailing list, check out the archive, including other brilliant songwriters like Ron Sexsmith, Donovan Woods, Theo Katzman, Curtis Stigers, Becca Stevens, Jesse Harris, Jorge Drexler, Imogen Heap, and a whole lot more. The Third Story is made in partnership with WBGO Studios. Visit wbgo.org/studios to find out more about all their award-winning content. And it's patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast to help keep the music moving through this project. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider leaving a review or some stars on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends. Here's me and Beth Nielsen Chapman talking it down.
At some point, I'd like to have a whole other conversation with you about the podcast world.
I want to talk to you about it because I see that you...
I have one. I had a partnership with this place in Nashville called the Acme Feed and Seed, which is a big, giant skyscraper building. And they had, various clubs and stuff in it. But they had this cool little radio station that was right on the street. Like you could look in the window. And
Oh, cool.
And they were cool. And I had several meetings with them, and I worked up a little thing with them where I owned the content, but they would partner with me, and then there'd be people that I'd come there to their little radio station studio, and Rodney Crowell came, and a bunch of really cool artists came, and we did about 14 episodes, but they weren't edited. So then we just did them really quickly, because once I put the word out, people were like, yeah, I'll come and do it. And I had a really cool format. It was like, I'd have my guest person, and I'd do 2 song critiques, and it's called the Song School Podcast, which I have all still sitting there kind of frozen. And the idea was that I would have people, send in a song and a lyric, and they'd have to sign a waiver.
Yep.
And basically, if they were chosen, then I would call them either on the phone in the show.
Yep.
And I would have them on the phone and they would sing the song or we'd play the song depending. They could do it live or they could do it. And then they would, I'd have the lyric and I would give them a sort of a drive-by song critique, which I'm really good at. And, and then I'd have one other artist come in live and play in the, live in the thing, even though it was a recorded thing. So, and then I'd have my guest artists who would come in. We'd talk about the process of songwriting and da-da-da. So that was basically it. But I'd start everyone with a little short, like 3-minute creativity blast where I'd talk about something about creativity and the creative process and stuff. And it was great. And then the pandemic hit. And then the person who was editing just before the pandemic, I got the first few edits. And I'm just such a control freak. I wanted it to be, I mean, what about that part when Rodney said, like, well, I know, but I can only do like 8 minutes because of it. I'm like, this isn't going to work. So I knew I was going to have to edit it myself. And I know how to edit Pro Tools and, like vocals and stuff. But just looking at 14 of them. And so then I got all the rights back. And then the pandemic hit. And then I've just been like dealing with all that shit.
So much shit. Beth Nielsen Chapman, everything that you just said, which I know was not really even what you intend to talk about, opens up so many questions for us, though.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind that I thought about last night when I saw you performing was the role of co-writing and collaborative creativity in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you said this thing, I'm a good critique. I'm really good at critiquing.
Yeah.
And it sort of like opens up the question about when you are in critiquing mode versus when you're in collaboration mode. And if you see those as the same thing or...
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, first of all, writing and critiquing are two different things. Yeah. And within writing, there are different channels. And my job as a teacher of songwriters or a person who tries to encourage people who are trying to write songs, because some people won't identify themselves as songwriters or they don't even give themselves the right to be creative. So my passion is to try to find those people and convince them that creativity is not something you have. It's something you're in. You're in creativity. It's not up to you. If you leave your cheese sandwich on the piano and you come back 4 days later, if it's not Velveeta, which is not a food, there will be mold. It goes right along all around us all the time. So this thing that's creative flow is like air, and it's all around us, and you either tap into it and use it efficiently or not efficiently or not at all. And if that's the case, then you're probably not breathing. So people say, I'm not creative. That's like saying, I'm not breathing. Now, people could say, I don't breathe very well. And that would be a true statement. So I start from the premise of trying to convince them to look at it as a different thing than the way they probably have been led to believe. So to answer your question that you asked 7 years ago, the process of starting a song, to me, personally, is always trying not to activate my brain at all.
I've heard you talk about that you're getting out of the brain space.
Yeah. And then making it as friendly, childlike friendly for as long as possible. But as I've become better as a songwriter, the other part of my brain that's very much more trained identifies things and starts to do a bit of analytical trimming and reorganizing as I go. And that's fine as long as it's not shutting down the childlike flow. And I've managed to keep both of those going. And that's when you're really, to me, when I'm writing with someone who's got both of those channels open, we're moving fast.
Yes.
We're writing a song in 20 minutes.
Yes.
And then sometimes it'll just stop. Sometimes the ideas will just go dirk, and just stop. When someone plays me a song that they wrote, I'm not in the childlike, what can I do to, make something up. It's like looking very distinctly at what's there and then finding the way to start with what's working. Like, really good here. This part here is great.
Yes.
And let their very fragile songwriting ego, which of all of us have, including myself, start to feel comfortable. Anyway, that process of just recognizing what's working.
Yes.
Letting them know this part's great. And then I get them all excited about how great that first verse is. And I'll go, so there's no reason why, since you've done that in the first verse, why the second verse wouldn't be as good or better. And then I introduce the homework part of the equation,
Right.
But the reason I feel like I'm good at it is because I can look at something and see, because I've written a million songs and stuff, I'll just go, that line, that's the third line of the second verse, is actually such a great title.
Yeah.
So I might say, this might even be a whole other song, but that thing, and you wrote that third line, and I'll pull something out, and they won't have even known what they've done,
Yes.
And I'll say, write that, and write actually 3 of them, 3 different ways. And the other thing I do a lot is, and I do this to myself, so
Yes.
I'm not asking anybody to do something that I wouldn't do myself. If I say the second verse should be better, I'll say, write 5 more second verses. Even though you think you've done it better and you're really happy with it, do me 4 more. And they're like, why would you do that? And I say, well, that is one of the greatest writing exercises that I can tell somebody to do, because your part of your brain is going, why are we doing this? Like I said, if you really want to take this exercise to the max, take your favorite brilliant song that's everybody knows what it is, like Yesterday by the Beatles. Pick a song you love that you can play, that you really know is airtight. Then write 5 new second verses to that. While this part of your brain screams at you and says, can't we just go to lunch now because this is stupid, because we're not going to make this any better. And as it's not about comparing it, it's just about doing it because it's this sort of the audacity of writing a new second verse to Yesterday by the Beatles crashes your brain past the barrier of something into this other thing where you're like hanging your foot over the edge of a cliff and you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know how to explain it any other way. And
it also seems like it speaks to the sort of lack of attachment to the work when you're making it. Like when you're in the writing mode, that childlike space that you talk about, you can't be judging it, because as soon as judgment is introduced, you're thinking, you're in your thinking brain.
Slowing it down, yeah.
So the idea of write 5 second verses is kind of like, and don't be too attached to any of them. Just write them, know?
Oh, and they have to be good.
And they have to be good.
Because I've had people go, and then I wrote this, and I'm like, no, you didn't really get invested.
You didn't actually do the thing.
So it's really weird. It's like, I love that you said that, because not being attached and being invested at the same time.
Yes.
Invested without attachment ought to be a T-shirt.
I think, though, that is the Nashville songwriting career. I don't know enough about it, but it seems to me that you have a city filled with very committed songwriters who are prepared to walk in once or twice a day and invest in that session with everything they have.
Yep.
And then be prepared to walk away from it and have it never be recorded or have nothing ever happen with it.
Or have somebody completely change it when they record it, and you're not really in a position, maybe you have a publishing deal and your publisher's going, well, they cut it, and I mean, I've had that happen where they changed one word and it wasn't as good. And in my personal opinion, I think they should ask permission of the writer.
Sure.
I think that's good way to behave. Yeah. Some artists just don't realize they sang the wrong word.
Yeah.
They don't realize that, or they'll just think it's fine, you know, and it's not like, oh, I think I'll take over and
but for you, every word is intentional.
Every word is absolutely intentional. One of the songs that was a number 2 hit for Martina McBride, a song called Happy Girl that I wrote with Annie Roboff, who I write a lot of songs. We wrote This Kiss and a bunch of different things. That she's had an incredible, successful career as a hit songwriter too. And the song has this line that says, let the axis twirl, I'm the happy girl. I'm the happy girl. Like there's just one, and I'm
not a happy girl.
I'm not a happy girl, like I'm a dozen
one.
Happy girl. And you'd think that was such a tiny little thing. And I remember, and Paul Worley produced this fantastic record, and Martina did a beautiful job, and a great record, hit record. And we were both we'd look at each other and go, oh, God, if she'd just gotten that one word.
Oh, watch me go, I'm a happy girl, and I've come to know that the world won't change just 'cause I complain. Let the axis twirl, I'm a happy girl.
Friends of mine were like, I can't believe you're complaining about it. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's not going to go to number 1. And it went up, 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 up. And they were like, see, it's going to go to number 1. And it went to number 2.
Oh, and you think that the difference between
absolutely.
2 and 1.
We know that it's because it didn't have the happy girl.
Oh, okay, so that suggests that you know when it's not going to number 1.
I don't really, but.
But do you feel it when you think it's a hit? I mean, even if it doesn't achieve hit status, like, do you think this one is...
Well, I'll tell you a really, I'll try to make it brief,
Yeah.
an amazing story about my number one Willie Nelson hit song. And I had my first number one was a song called Strong Enough to Bend that I wrote with Don Schlitz, the guy who wrote The Gambler and all these big,
wow.
huge hits for Randy Travis and many more. And we wrote Strong Enough to Bend in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we wrote another song, and then we went to lunch, and my head was just spinning. It was really one of my first big co-writes when I got to Nashville. And it didn't get cut for 2 years. And the demo went around, everybody heard it, all the girl groups heard it, all the female artists heard it. And then Tanya Tucker recorded it, and I got to sing the background vocals on the record. Then it was a big hit, went to number one. It was nominated for Song of the Year.
Like a tree out in the backyard that never has been broken by the wind. Our love will last forever if we're strong enough to bend.
So right from there, my phone started to ring. And one of the people that called me was Fred Foster, who was a giant in the music business. He had signed Chris Christopherson and Dolly Parton. He had Monument Records. He's the co-writer of Bobby McGee, big,
Classics.
And he was recording Willie.
Wow.
And he calls me up and he goes, well, Beth, Willie's not writing right now. He's got a lot going on in his life and he's not writing, and we got to turn this thing in. And he I've been pestering him to get some songs to me, and he finally just said, hey, get whoever wrote that song Strong Enough to Bend to write me one, or something like that. So it was like deemed, asked directly from Willie Nelson. And I went about completely losing my mind for 3 months, and I wrote this song that I got the title first, which is always a bad thing for me because then I start thinking too much. But it was a really good title. There's nothing I can do about it now. And there's a great saying in Nashville, like, you can't copyright a title. So if you have a great title, keep it to yourself because anybody can write it out from under you. And I kept hearing people saying, well, there's nothing I can do about it now. And I'd be like, somebody's going to write it. Anyway, so I wrote the song, and it took me to the very last minute. I literally was driving to the airport in my bedroom slippers with my same robe on I'd had for 3 months with my dirty hair. Like, I'd been in my writing room trying to write this song.
Had you been writing other songs along the way?
No, I wrote that song for 3 months, which is crazy because there was a lot of dead air in there, a lot of, pacing. And anyway, so I turned it in, and I got to actually go to Austin and play on the record. And like 2 days later, I was sitting there in the Cut and Putt studio in the middle of a golf course in Austin. And I remember they played the demo, which I played all the parts on the demo. It's a little 4-track demo where, and I did this boodly, boodly, boodly piano thing on my little dinky keyboard. And this was rudimentary stuff I had back then. But it was fun. It was charming, But I had done the vibe of the beat was totally based on the road again. The train beat.
Just can't wait to get on the road again. The life I love is making music with my friends. And I can't wait to get on the road again.
So they kick it off, and I'm sitting there like 6 feet away from Willie with the hole in his guitar, and I'm like just pinching myself, thinking, this is incredible,
Top of the mountain.
And they wanted me to play guitar on it. I was like, okay. And Paul English, his drummer, who had started out as his bouncer and ended up working with him, they were like best friends, and he saved his life many times. And back when they were playing behind chicken wire and stuff, he kicked it off. They all listened to the demo. And they kicked it off, and he just, instead of going dun 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 dun, he went dun dun dun,
Swung it, kind of shuffle.
And I didn't even know how to play the guitar to that. I was just kind of like,
yeah.
Well, okay, what's happening? And then Willie's phrasing, of course, he's known for his insanely unusual, unexpected phrasing. So he just laid his voice on top of there, and I couldn't even tell what country I was in.
I've got a long list of real good reasons for all the things I've done. I've got a picture in the back of my mind of what I've lost and what I've won.
And I was like, okay, well, this is going all to a different place that I'm sure they're just running it down, and we'll do it a few more times, and it'll be fine.
I've survived every situation, knowing when to freeze and when to run. And regret is just a memory written on my brow, and there's nothing I can do about it now.
get to the end of the take,
Ha!
and and everybody's going hooting and hollering, and there's like, great job, that was fantastic. and Willie goes, well, I say let's go to lunch.
Yeah.
And I let out some sort of animal sound
Yeah.
somehow in that second. I just thought, no. Like I said, no. And I went, oh, was that me? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Because I was just, what? And he looked at me, and his eyes are so intense. He's got like really dark eyes. Not dark mean, but,
Yeah.
like really intense. Is there a problem? And I'm like, no, no, no. And I started kind of trying to find a way to put into words like maybe
Yeah.
we should do it again. And I
Yeah.
said, I just wanted to point out because there was one thing I noticed just FYI before we go to lunch, and I'm like way too many words coming out of my mouth and things. Part of my brain is going, you do realize you are telling Willie Nelson how to make his own record, right? You
Yeah.
hear that you're doing that, right, Beth? So maybe you want to stop with the words. And I was just going, blah, blah, blah. And whatever it was I said was something like we should try another one or we should listen to the demo again, because I said something at the end of it was like, I kind of wrote it to a train beat, sort of like On the
Yeah.
Road Again. You're a big hit song. Remember that one? And I think Paul might have heard it as a shuffle.
Yeah.
And Willie goes, well, let's ask Paul. Paul's putting his coat on, talking to people, and he goes, hey, Paul, would you say that you heard that last song as a shuffle? And Paul goes, yeah, I did. And Willie goes, that's what I thought too. And he goes, well, let's go to lunch.
Oh, question solved.
answered.
Question
And I was
answered.
Like, right. Okay. So I go to lunch, and I'm like trying not to cry because I know that my dream is now hit the wall, and that song will never see the light of day. I'm convinced. And I remember calling my husband out behind the back on a payphone of this restaurant, crying and just saying, it's a total disaster. He goes, honey, you just haven't had enough sleep. I'm sure it's fine. Willie Nelson makes great records, blah, blah, blah. Record comes out. It's the first single. I don't even tell anyone I have a song on the record and there were 2 other of my songs on that same record. He cut 3 of my songs on that record, and I was just keeping a low profile because I knew I was going down in history as the person whose song tanked Willie Nelson's career for the first time. And it came out, and I was like, I couldn't even listen to it. And I'd sung on it, I played on it, but I was just, it's going to be a disaster. And then it went into the top 20. I went, oh no, now people are going to hear it. It's going to go like to top 20, and then people are going to hear it, and then they're going to see that I wrote it, and it's going to tank my career. I mean, I was so consumed.
That's very funny. It's going to be a hit, and it's going to tank my career.
Exactly. Yeah. Because at the time when I was writing with Don Schlitz, he was having so many hits on the radio. They were like 5 of his songs in the top 10.
Yeah.
And I said, I didn't realize you wrote that song. He goes, yeah, I wouldn't have put that one out. I'm like, well, Don, you wrote it. He goes, yeah, but you got to be careful what you write, because when you get really popular, they'll cut anything, even if it's not great.
Oh.
And I was like, wow, But he was a brilliant songwriter, so he had astute knowledge of what he thought was his better songs. And he said, you put it in there, and anybody will come and get it, and they'll cut it. And I said, well, I hope I have that problem Sunday. So anyway, it goes into the top 10. The Willie Nelson thing goes to the top 10. I start hearing it on the radio. And people are asking me about it. And I'm like, yeah, I wrote that. Well, golly, why didn't you tell me? I'm like, well, I just, I don't know. I just didn't want to jinx it. And then it went into the top 5, and I was hearing it all the time. And then it was like, I couldn't turn on the radio without hearing it. And then I started thinking, and I started listening to it, and I thought, that's not that bad. By the time it went to number 1, I was like, that's right. I wrote that, just like that, So I was I metamorphized all the way through that process. And I realized there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. And if you write a great song, it may not sound right to you, but it's still, and I think that is a great song. And I worked really hard to write it. I had to rhyme now like 4 times more than is humanly possible. And I remember sitting in my little writer's room at 3:00 in the morning, sobbing because I couldn't come up with another owl rhyme. And I started thinking of rock-a-bye baby on the treetop. And then the bow will break, and I thought, and I don't remember how I put it, like, and I've been dreaming like a child since the cradle broke the bow, and there's nothing I can do about it now. And I thought, that's the shit right there.
Yeah. That's a pro shit.
That's some pro shit.
And I've been dreaming like a child since the cradle broke the bow, and there's nothing I can do about it now.
I thought a lot about the craft of songwriting watching you sing your half a dozen songs last time. You had 30 minutes to get your point across last night.
It was very short.
and there were so many thoughts that, that I collected in that short amount of time. But one of them was, an artist is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
To be a singer and have a compelling delivery is a reality. To be a great musician is a thing. But a great song, can also walk itself onto a stage on its two legs and deliver itself to an audience through whoever is going to say. I mean, sometimes the song is much greater even than whoever is delivering it. The song is so powerful. A
Right.
real song, a great song, well crafted, provocative song, something that makes you feel, something that has its own three dimensions, it lives in its own universal space, is so powerful. And you are also an artist and you're a musician and you're a singer, but the songs were so strong
Well,
and
thank
so
you.
compelling. And it made me remember, right, this is about songs. I mean, really what
Yeah.
songs take on their own life, which suggests that all of those songs that you sang, which are many of them deeply personal to you,
Mm-hmm.
could also be delivered differently by different people and still have their same integrity, even though they
Yes.
might not be the way you would sing them or have envisioned them.
Yes.
The song almost takes on its own life at a certain point. It doesn't
Yes,
belong
absolutely.
to anyone.
That's right. That's right. And when I wrote Sand and Water,
Yeah.
and I played that, the first person that heard it was Rodney Crowell.
Yes.
And I remember trying to get him to write it with me because I wanted him to co-write something with me. And he's like, that's finished.
Yeah.
And not only that, but that song is going to go out in the world like a little piece of medicine. It's going to find who needs to hear it right when they need to hear it.
Yeah.
And it's not even your business what happens then. You can't even stop it, no matter what. Even if it's not a single, even if you think it's just this, it will have its own power source to get to the next person.
Yes.
And that's exactly what's happened.
All alone I came into this world. All alone I will someday die. Solid stone is just sand and water, baby. Sand and water, and a million years gone by.
To me, those songs that have done that to me, that other people have written, have been my guiding light of the standard I want to reach as a songwriter. And, I've been incredibly blessed with some of the recordings I've had of my songs. And I've also had some really amazing recordings where the person singing made some big changes in the song.
Yeah.
And I would have, if they'd called me and said, can I do that? I would have begged them not to, because I really do feel that I have it right,
Yes.
and it's all subjective, but then they went ahead and made an absolutely stunning record.
Yeah.
But I still hold that if it had been The Happy Girl, it would have been
Number
better,
one.
even better.
I
Well,
mean-
even better. Who knows if it would have gone to number one? But the song, I want to get back to what you're saying, because
Yeah.
this is one of my pet peeves about where we are, and I don't want to go off into music biz, because
Yeah.
that's another show and a half. But what we have lost culturally as humans as a result of things that are out of balance and whatever you want to call it, greed or corporate, whatever, that has undermined the ability for the people who actually write the songs, even if they are or are not the singers. Sometimes they are, sometimes they are not. Especially in Nashville, there are working songwriters.
Yes.
And the percentage that they get of the trickle down of whatever streaming is abysmal and absolutely criminal. And, I just had somebody ask, my brother just asked me this morning, so Spotify's getting better now, and I said, no, they're actually not near good enough. There's a lot of PR and a lot of campaign and a lot of thank you so much, Spotify, because blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's so beyond out of balance, and it needs to get fixed and sorted, probably through legislation. That said, I was asked to be on a panel, and I won't name names, but there was the head of a lot of the tech companies, and I was the token singer-songwriter. And I was at the end of a long line of people calling it content, and how it should be free. And it got to me, and this is in a room full of 30-somethings, most of whom were on and off looking down at their phone while all this technical stuff was going on. And I had 30 seconds to do my thing as the token singer-songwriter working actually in, an actual one of those content people that makes the stuff, And I just thought, what am I going to say? I don't even know where to start. So I just went, I am a lineman for the county, and I drive the main road, searching in the sun for another overload. And then I stopped. You could hear a pin drop. Every single face was up going, like, what's she doing, you know? And I let this 1 second pass and I said, what just happened? Mm-hmm. What did I just do that made everybody look at me? What just happened, you know? What I did was some content, y'all. Okay, so the person who wrote that song didn't have to do another job. Now, they were brilliant, and by the way, his name is Jimmy Webb, and there are people who are born to do that, and that has enriched the lives of people beyond measure, and they need to be paid. It's like a part of the garden that's not getting any water, and you're not going to have any flowers for long, you know. So the song is the gas that goes in the car that makes the artist, who's let's say the artist is the vehicle. You could have a Maserati.
Yeah.
If you don't have gas in the tank, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You could put rubbing alcohol in there, but you won't get far.
Yeah.
So the song, like you're talking about, like a song, I love what you said. A song can walk onto a stage, and like Waylon Jennings, who I got to be friends with, said to me one time, he goes, great song, don't care who sings it.
Yeah.
And that is the absolute core value of what the music business has to offer. And if you don't start with that, if you don't start with a great song, you know, there's a great thing, you see bumper stickers about 10 years ago. It says, it all starts with it all starts with a great song. Starts with a great song. And now it's changed, it's crossed out. It says, starts with a great songwriter. Mm-hmm. In other words, please pay them so they can make money. Anyway, enough lecturing about that. And I teach workshops to people who are finding out they have permission to try to write them, or try to write anything, or to try to paint something, or try to do something. And they get so excited. And I said, this is really not about whether or not you're going to make it. It's not about whether or not you get lucky, because part of it's luck and part of it's timing. But look at Van Gogh. You know, I said, if you're willing to be Van Gogh and you find that the value of creating your body of work is worth what it's worth because you're just doing it, that's what I would point you towards. And then it might be great and it might be not, but it will be something nobody else could have done.
Yeah. I mean, I think you are sitting right now in the intersection of art and commerce. You don't want to get bogged down in the business, but the business is a reality and you have strong feelings about it because you understand what it is to be valued as a songwriter. And on the other hand, you of all people have made a career out of writing the most intensely personal songs. I mean, maybe not all of them.
Well, they're pretty much all, somehow there's a personal thing in almost every one, even if it's a song like This Kiss. You know,
Right.
there's some essence of my truth that comes in there, or something I'm learning and figuring out usually.
I talked to the songwriter last year, David Poe, who said to me, a song doesn't have to be real, but it has to be true.
Has to ring true, yeah.
I love, I mean, maybe that's been a phrase that's been, but I loved that, and I've been sort of living by that. Yeah, it doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to be autobiographical. You know, like I sing a song called Years, which is a song about growing up in one place and going to coming home from college and sitting on the porch before I let my parents know that I'm there. And I wrote the song after I got married and moved to a house in 1979 in Mobile, Alabama, that my new husband's great-great-grandfather had built. And I realized I'd missed out on sort of being from somewhere because I'm an Air Force brat. So what do I know about being from somewhere? And I forgot to go to college. So I always introduce the song saying, nothing in this song is true except that the truth of the song is that I got it. I got it, that I missed out on something, and I was kind of working through my sense of what I missed.
Yes.
But all of the directions home are in the song, like you turn left on Laurel and then the house appears. There are true things in the song.
Yes.
So I'd tell them that on the beginning, and then I'd start playing the song. It's a song called Years. And I say, I went home for Christmas to the house that I grew up in. And then I go and wink at the audience and they laugh. So it's part of my show to kind of show that you don't have to write autobiographically.
Yes.
Except from the sense of your center of truth.
Yes.
I went home for Christmas to the house that I grew up in. Going back was something after all these years. I drove down Monterey Street and felt a little sadness. When I turned left on Laurel and the house appeared.
Sometimes it's discovering the truth,
Yes.
figuring it out. In fact, I wrote a song on my new record called The Truth
Mm-hmm.
because my sister and I have had this ongoing, intense discussion. We would actually book time to talk to each other on the phone because she is on the exact polar opposite of my political reality. She's in the world where her reality is something that she derives from a source that I wouldn't even spend 5 minutes listening to. So that's happening a lot in not just our country, but all over the world. And we have these conversations. We start and end with, I love you too. Well, you're absolutely wrong. Well, you're wrong. Well, you're brainwashed. No, you're brainwashed. We have not moved the needle 1 inch, except we still love each other and we're still showing up and trying to have these conversations in a gentle, constructive way, but we both hit the same brick wall. So I wrote this song called The Truth. And I remember my first husband, Ernest, used to say, a thing is what it is and not another thing. And there's only one thing that's true. So every line in this song is about the distillation of what is the truth. And it's like, the truth is always now and ever what it is. And, you can see the lyric when you look at it. But what I love about it is that my sister thinks every single line in that song is true.
And so do you.
And so do I.
Oh, the truth is only now and always what remains. Oh, the truth is only everlasting, never change.
What a weird, funny time to be in the world. This is something that I think everyone is challenged by, and I think I'm finding that kindness is the only thing that makes sense. Like even somebody who's just completely lost their mind, I just look at them as in an altered state.
Yes.
And I'm just going to make sure that I don't make it worse. I've stopped trying to convince people.
Yeah.
But I do try to get through my songs.
Yeah, no, and I think you can do a lot. I think you can do a lot through songs. I mean, I think you can, whether or not people are even aware of what's being done to them. I think you can transform people through songs. But actually, what I want to talk about now for a minute is how songs have transformed you. And, you mentioned about how you didn't grow up in one place and that you missed out and you forgot to go to college. Let's talk about it. You grew up in a big family and an Army brat. That's like two. That's Air Force brat.
Yeah.
So that's two kind of big life pieces. You're one of 5 kids?
In the middle.
Right in the middle.
Trying to keep everybody safe on either side of me, yeah.
I saw you walk on stage last night, and I thought, there is a natural way of talking to a group of people that maybe can only come out of coming from a big family, where it's like, I'm here, look at me, and I'm here to talk to you right now, and you guys looking at me, I want to tell you this thing right now.
Yeah.
And I said to Amanda, she come from a big family. I could just see, there was something about the way you talk to the audience the second you walked out.
I walk in a room talking is what I do. So I've been told that's not cool sometimes. So yeah.
I almost could see you as a kid just in that moment. Like, this is must be what it's like to be in a big family.
Yeah. But, for many years of my early career, I was very awkward on stage and very self-conscious and not really believing that I quite had what it took and that I was, always overworking my voice. I mean, I was a late bloomer to coming into my center as an artist.
Yeah.
And I remember my first husband was like my best cheerleader and also my deepest critic. He used to get so furious with me if he'd come and see me at the Bluebird and I'd play a song. There's one song I wrote when I was 18. I had a boyfriend who died suddenly of a brain tumor, and that was just like shocking. And I wrote this song several years later about that, plus another friendship that went awry. But it's a song called Emily, and it's about losing a best friend, and everybody cries during the song. And when I first wrote it, it had power to it, and I would play it, and the minute I would finish the last chord, you could hear people sniffling during the song, because it has turns in the middle of the bridge, and people would go, "Oh no, she's dying," and I would always just do some kind of stupid joke, or I'd do a funny voice or something before they even had a chance to hear the last chord ring out. And I remember having this huge fight with Ernest on my way home. He was so furious with me. He says, "I don't understand. why you would be given this God-given talent. You write this absolutely airtight, perfect song. You have everyone's heart cracked open, and then Beetlejuice jumps out of your mouth or something. What is that? Why did you do that? And I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, don't criticize me. He goes, no, you have to hear me. You have to hear me. Please, the next time you sing that song, I want you to freeze. Like, freeze. Count to 10. And then just be normal, okay? Don't be funny. Don't say, ha, 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 never mind, sorry, I didn't mean to tell you she was going to die. It was just this thing.
Some friendships grow distant with time, and it's no wonder, Emily, so much can change. We're too far to visit, too busy to write, but a closeness between us remains. Best friends are made through smiles and tears, and sometimes that fades over miles and years. But I knew right away when I saw you again, Emily, we'll always be friends.
And he was trying for many years to get me to not be so nervous when I performed. And when he was actually, like a couple of days before he died in 1994, one of the last conversations I had with him, he said, okay, I know I've been bugging you about how to be comfortable or whatever. He said, but listen, if you're not enjoying performing, just stop doing it, because I want to let you off the hook, And I was like, wow, you've never said that to me. He goes, I just think you need to have fun. Just go out there and have fun. If you're not going to have fun, then do something else. Don't feel pressured to do that. And it was the weirdest thing. And after he died, about 2 weeks later, I ended up singing a song for a friend of mine at an event. I walked out on the stage and I felt completely in my center, and I felt at peace. And I just thought, thank you. I don't know how you did that. And I never ever looked back. And the other thing, I learned how to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. So when I walk out on a stage, making mistakes is part of the program,
Yes.
And it's, as soon as I make the first mistake, especially in the UK where I tour a lot, my fans are like, there she goes. All right, it's going to be a great show. I mean, I literally don't lose 1 second of anxiety over worrying about whether or not I make a mistake.
Let's walk it back a little bit.
Okay.
Because that was your answer to I came from a big family.
I know, you got to just put your hand up.
No, I love it. I love it because every road leads to a wonderful place. You're born in Texas?
I was born in Harlingen, Texas.
And then moved to Germany?
No, then we moved to New Hampshire. Then we moved to Massachusetts. Then we moved to California. Then we moved back to Massachusetts. Then we moved to Germany. Then we moved to Alabama.
And you stayed in Alabama?
And we stayed in Alabama. And I moved from Germany to Alabama when I was turning 13, and it was 1969. And my last school trip had been to go to Dachau.
Yeah.
So that was pretty earth-shattering for me.
Did you draw a line between what you had seen in Germany and the civil rights movement in Alabama when you got
Before
to the
I
States?
even got to Alabama, after going to Dachau, I missed like 3 days of school. I was in the fetal position. I was overwhelmed. I was psychically absolutely overwhelmed. And my mother was really upset because she didn't read the fine print of the permission slip. She just kind of signed it, and off I went. And it changed my DNA about humanity, the world. And I'd been listening to Joan Baez and, starting to look at things a little bit, but I was still playing with Barbies,
Yeah.
And then after that, it was like all the Barbie dolls, like, what time is the news on? Like I wanted to know what was happening in the world. And there it was, hosing down black people. Martin Luther King gets killed, the Vietnam War, all that was just on the news. And I was completely now looking at that. So to me, that was exactly what was the same thing as Nazi Germany. Any kind of racism, ethnic cleansing, it was just another form of ethnic cleansing. So I didn't even know we were moving to Alabama. And then for like a couple of weeks, then my dad got his orders. He goes, well, we're moving to Montgomery, Alabama. And I'm like, no, we can't go there. Oh my God, they're like hanging people from trees, and they just killed Martin Luther King. And I mean, and I just remember being traumatized for the first couple of years. My family's still based there, even though they're all from New York and New Jersey, but there's a whole another generation, And it's come a long way. It's not all
Yeah.
the way enough, but I mean, there's the Lynching Museum, which is an amazing, amazing museum in Montgomery, Alabama now, which I'm so proud that they did because it tells the story, you know. And for that to have been able to happen means a lot of people have shifted, or maybe this next generation has shifted.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
You stay in Alabama. Is that true?
Yep. Yeah, I got married. Well, I went down to Mobile
Yeah.
and ended up meeting my husband and got married and moved back down there like within 6 months. And right about that time, it was like end of the 70s, early 80s. I had just gotten a record deal with Capitol Records, and Barry Beckett was going to produce my first album. So, but I was still living in Mobile. I had no idea anything about. I didn't know how any of the music business worked.
How'd you get signed?
Well, I was in a little band that played in the bowling alley lounge there in Montgomery. We were the only thing going on really. So it was packed every night. And Mac McAnally used to come down, and he came and saw our band. And then I took the place of Tommy Shaw when I joined the band. I used to sneak in there when I was underage, and then when Tommy Shaw got lifted out and joined Styx, I became sort of the band's Joni Mitchell. And so through some people we knew, Mac McAnally and Tommy, and I think the band came to know a couple of the producers in Muscle Shoals. And then at the same time, there was a guy that had a studio in Birmingham, Alabama, and I used to go dump my songs there, and I kind of signed a really bad 5-year slave contract with him for artist and writing. And
how old are you at this point?
I was just 17. My dad had to co-sign, and I remember my dad taking me to a lawyer that was actually a cattle lawyer.
Yeah.
So I always tell my songwriting students, if
Yeah.
you walk into your lawyer's office and there's big steers coming
Yeah.
out of the wall, just go somewhere else.
Turn
But
around.
he looked at this contract. He said, well, it don't look like she has to pay any money. Just has to leave him her songs and he'll get them cut. It sounds like a pretty good deal. I mean, he don't pay her anything, but she don't have to give him any money. I'm like, So anyway, I ended up getting out of that horrible deal a couple of years later because I was in this band that started recording in Muscle Shoals, and half of the thing we were recording was my songs. But I hadn't heard from that guy in a couple of years, and I just, you know, but a couple of the songs were, well, I was still under contract. Basically. And then Terry Woodford found out that I had this outstanding contract. He said, can you bring it to me tomorrow? And I went, yeah. And I brought it to him, and he was like, I remember him putting his head down on the console like this. He goes, we can't use any of your songs. We can't use your voice. You have to get out of this contract.
Yep. So you got out.
Then I got a real lawyer.
Yeah.
And he wrote a couple of letters. And what happened was the guy that I'd signed the contract with took my 50 songs, went to Screen Gems, and sold them my 50 songs. And they gave him $12,000. And that was my first aha moment of, I need to actually pay attention to this stuff. And A, and B, this stuff is valuable.
Yeah.
So the only one favor this person did me was that they allowed me to see that there's value in what I was doing, even at 15, 16 years old. And there's one song out of that catalog that got cut, you know, by Crystal Gayle. So I was still learning. I had a long way to go as a
What was the
songwriter.
song?
A song called When Love Is New.
Love that's new will get you feeling like you finally found it, and there's nothing in the world can make you blue. Well, like anything that ages, time alone can change it, but you never think of that when love is new.
And I ended up learning a lot from that. And, you know, then I was with Screen Gems. So they had bought my contract, and then they renegotiated with me and made it a much better contract. And I had a proper musician's lawyer. I mean, a music business
But you were
lawyer.
able to get cuts and sing on things. You weren't restricted. You were able to
it
operate.
was much more reasonable. And I got paid $300 a week to get to write songs. That was like unbelievable. I was like winning the lottery.
Yeah.
And then they helped pitch me to Muscle Shoals, and Barry Beckett became aware of me, and so I started to record this record for Capitol, which came out right at the beginning of the disco era and didn't do anything. So,
Right.
which is good because it wasn't the best work of my life.
It is not out there. It's hard to hear it.
It's a collector's item. I have the masters, which ended up in a flood, and so they're covered with mud, but I don't own them. They're Capitol's. So.
So it's 10 years, though, right, between that record and the next record?
Yes, because I literally was so horrified that nothing happened, because I was in this weird bubble of now I'm going to make a record and it's going to be a hit. And of course, you know, and I was just naive, and I had no idea what really went in and what my odds were of, you know, even being on a major label, how many dime a dozens of those there are. But to me, that was like, I've been discovered, you know. And Disco Duck was on the radio, and all these other songs were coming along. I liked Donna Summer, but I was like, oh my God, you know, I can't. And all the reviews in Billboard magazine were like, really beautiful work. Too bad she didn't put it out 5 years ago. You know, Carole King's little sister,
Yes.
you know, kind of thing. So I shut it off. I just went, you know what? That's my best work. That's my best shot. I was on a major label. Screen Gems dropped me about a year later. I mean, I kind of wrote a few more songs for a little while, but then they were like, well, she's not on. I got dropped by Capitol. I got dropped by the publisher. And I thought, well, I'll just start my family, and I don't need to do that. I'll just sing songs in bars, and I don't need to do my own stuff. I'm not going to. And I stopped writing, had a baby, and all my creative juices went into making paintings and making baby things and sculpting little heads with Play-Doh and just everything except writing songs. And my husband was like, oh boy, you know, she's losing her mind, you know.
And what did he do?
He was the director of a treatment facility for adolescents that he built from the ground up. And his degree was in philosophy, but he worked with psychologists, and he was brilliant. He saved a lot of lives of young kids. He would take wards of the state, and it was like a group home, and it was a full on, you know. But he always believed in me, and he was a poet. He was very, very good with words. So he would be my sounding board, right? So he was trying to get me to write and get me to write and get me to write. And I was like, no. And I was like, a couple of years went by, and I remember him coming up behind me. I was sitting at the kitchen table trying to get this nose just right on this little Play-Doh head, 3 o'clock in the morning. And he just put his hands gently on my shoulders. And I was waiting for the barrage, and he didn't go, you know.
He didn't give it to you.
He just didn't say anything. And I said, okay. And he goes, I really think it's time for you to start writing songs again. And I said, you know, it's just not going to happen. And the next week, we went to see Coal Miner's Daughter. And it was that movie that broke me through my frozen state, because the scene where Loretta Lynn has her 3 children climbing all over her while she's planting potatoes, while she's writing one of her iconic songs, because her career just started getting going. And I thought, okay, I'm being a baby. And then I went back to writing. And the first 8 songs I wrote were so bad, because all I wanted to do was write a Loretta Lynn song. I didn't care about writing anything. I wasn't going to ever be an artist again. I was just going to write songs for country artists. And I started listening to Emmylou and really loved those roots kind of records and stuff. And I wrote, and they were terrible, like really bad. And
do you think part of the reason you think they're terrible is because they didn't have that kernel of truth in them? That's
for sure. But the real thing also was just my brain, my songwriting brain was just needed oiling. You know, I just needed to get back into it. It's a muscle like anything else. That's why one of the great muscle builders, like if you want to lift 3,000 pounds in the gym of creativity, rewrite the second verse of Yesterday about 5 times. It will bring you up a notch. Yeah. So, here's how I knew how bad they were. When I'd play them for Ernest, who would usually be extremely opinionated, like annoyingly opinionated, he would just get real quiet and his eyes would get wider, and he had a really hard time. He could never lie. So he'd just say, you just keep on writing. Just keep going. Not going to say anything yet. Let's just keep going. I'm like, oh boy, that must be really bad. So anyway, I finally wrote a song called 5 Minutes, which was a country song about a woman leaving her husband who's treated her wrong, and she's at the door going out, and he's coming home. And he's saying, what are you doing? And she's saying, you got 5 minutes to figure it out, because I'm leaving in 5 minutes. And that was a #1 hit for Lori Morgan 5 years after I moved to Nashville. So, you know, it just the thing had to come of its time.
You look so disbelieving at my suitcase by the door. My taxi's on its way here. I can't take it anymore. Lately you've forgotten what loving me's about. Well, now you've got 5 minutes to figure it out. You've got 5 minutes to tell me what I needed to hear.
I felt that even from your stories last night too. Some of these songs have histories that some are written in 20 minutes, some are written over the course of 3 years, 5 years.
18 is my record.
Taken 18 years to write a song.
18 years, yeah.
So even though Ernest had built this center and done all of this, he agrees to move with you, or he insists that you move to Nashville.
Yeah. I can do my job anywhere. Of course he couldn't. None of his credits, he had to get reaccredited, had to go back to, get a degree in counseling and stuff. But he was 100% committed. And, the first couple of years in Nashville, I lost my voice. I was really panic stricken. I thought, oh my God, I'm never, because I realized how many other, this was the first time I realized the odds of, because there were so
many songwriters.
So many talented people. Patty Loveless was working as a waitress at the, Slice of Life Bakery, and I'd hear her singing under her breath when she took my order to the kitchen. I'm like, did you hear that voice? I was just like, oh my God, what have we done? But it took a couple of years, and it was, I tell people who come to Nashville, I said, just dig in, because you're going to be here for a while, and it's a process.
I think, I was just saying to a friend last night, it's so hard to live in a world knowing that the great geniuses are here too.
Yeah.
How do you even get out of bed knowing that? And in Nashville, it's like, New York is kind of like that too, but Nashville is like, they're just around the corner, the greatest.
Right.
You have to, in spite of that, knowing you have to wake up and do your job. And write again.
Here's my little pep talk.
Yeah.
For that. You own this little piece of real estate for this period of time that you're conscious and you're in your life, which is looking out from behind your eyes with the particular things that have happened to you and how you've dealt with it.
Mm-hmm.
Your story. Nobody has that. Nobody has that channel available to them but you. So you can either leave a trail of information about what that was like, and it can be beautiful, it can be ugly, it can be you take out a whole restaurant of people with a shotgun, it can be whatever it is, the trail you leave, or I call it your body of work, and I think of it as like a cave wall that somebody's going to come look at 2,000 years from now. What did Beth think? So it's what I work on every day to see how does the world filter through me?
Yes.
Nobody can do your filter. You're it. You're the camera looking out. That's only one spot in all time, in the whole existence of whatever is. You're it. And it's like finding a way to get your ego to sit in that chair.
Yes.
That's where the ego belongs. The ego belongs there because, you know what? I got something to say. You have no idea how to say what I have to say. Joni Mitchell could not come close to writing my song. Mm-hmm. Now, her skills might mean that the way that she writes her song is going to be in a better form, but you can work on skills. You can get better at skills, but nobody can take your voice. Nobody. So get into that, fill yourself up with that when you're writing and do whatever comes out,
You started writing. You already had an unusual childhood. You'd been moved around a lot. You had a big family, whatever. But you developed a skill, a way of telling your story through your eyes when you were still a teenager. You had no way of knowing what was coming for you.
No
but
way. Mm-mm.
I think we need to acknowledge that you have experienced an enormous amount of loss. Many people have.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of trauma, illness. They don't all have the tools to tell their story the way
they have not all accessed the tools they have to tell their story. Everybody has the tools somewhere or somehow, and people sometimes have to pick up a stick and sharpen it, and that's the tool. So there's different levels of accessibility to great tools.
You had started to sharpen your stick.
Yeah.
And as you've moved through this story, you've been able to kind of chronicle it and tell your story through songs.
Yeah.
Which I think is really kind of extraordinary. It's not something that now looking back at your life, you say, I think I need to figure out how I'm going to tell this story. I mean, it's there all along the way. There are all these documents, all these moments.
Well, what's really weird is that a lot of my songs that do that, the songs that are the closer to the bone, preceded the events that the songs are about. That's happened numerous times. I guess the first time I really noticed that it happened was with Sand and Water, because half of that album, half of those songs were started about 2 years before Ernest was diagnosed, given 6 weeks to live. And he lived for almost 2 years. So, I mean, I had half songs written, and I remember playing them for him, because I used to play him songs as I was writing them, and he would be going, wow, I love that. What's that about? It sounds like somebody's going to die. I'm like, I know, I don't know. I was thinking maybe I'm thinking about my parents, getting older, and I didn't know. And the thing is, part of the childlike thing of gathering little bits and just putting them down without judgment is just opening up to whatever comes through.
Yeah.
And then I look at it kind of like the next day and I'm thinking, that's interesting. Like there's this chorus that said, we hold it all for a little while, don't we? Kiss the dice, taste the rain like little knives upon our tongue. We can do it all when the lights go on and the music plays and we take the stage like we own the place, as if time were cheap and the night forever young.
We hold it all for a little while, don't we? Kiss the dice, taste the rain like little knives upon our tongue. We can do no wrong when the lights go on and the music plays, and we take the stage like we own the place, as if time were cheap and the night forever young.
Had this chorus and he called it the Bob Dylan song, you know, and he was like, when are you going to finish that? You know, he pestered me about that song and a couple of other ones. So there was this premonition of, then he was diagnosed, then everything kind of went on hold for a while, then 2 years instead of 6 weeks. And then when he was literally the week before he died, he's still asking me, when am I going to get that last verse to my song? And I wrote that song mad at him. I stomped to the other end of the house and I wrote this song because we had just talked about, you know, he wanted to have his ashes scattered in this place where we used to go fishing at the Gulf of Mexico. So I wrote this verse that said, so let him turn my soul 7 shades of blue, and when the oceans roll, I will wave to you, and the birds will sing my laughter, and the whales will steal my song, and I'll be happy ever after, and the world will get along. And I played that song, played that verse for him, and he was like, that is absolutely perfect, except I'm not sure about happy ever after. I'm like, you are not going to tell me now how to, seriously? And he goes, no, it's got to be, I'll be okay forever after. And I remember arguing with him about this word, but.
And where'd you come down?
I had to say okay because he said it was his dying wish.
Ah.
So every time I play that song and I get to that line, I kind of wink at him, you know, like, it's not as good, but okay.
All right.
You know?
So let him turn my soul 7 shades of blue, and with the oceans roll, I will wave to you, and the birds will sing my laughter, and the whales will steal my song. But I'll be okay forever after, and the world will get along. We hold it all.
But it's okay. Because, you know, there was something about that little fight. That was like our last little fight about whether or not I said happy ever after or okay ever after. And I'm like, well, you know what, sweetheart? It is my song. He goes, yeah, but it's my death.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but I mean, okay, fine, you know, fine. Your dying wish, okay, that's it. You don't get another dying wish. You know? What's fascinating, though, is, I mean, I sound like I'm laughing about it like it's Pat. I mean, it was devastating to lose him. It was devastating to lose my husband, Bob, just recently, you know. But in the midst of all of that, there's been this incredible emotional flexibility where we're crying one minute and then we're saying the most funny joke about it, because you can't get a more contrasting backboard than actual death to bring the light.
Yes.
You know?
Well, and I think you were kind of prepping for it like that. So when you told the story about how Ernest was offended or upset or frustrated with you for trying to make light of a heavy moment, telling the story of your boyfriend who had passed.
Right.
And he said, don't do that. Don't.
Right.
You should sit in it and allow people to sit in it. Why are you trying to protect people from that?
Right.
But it almost feels like you had already started to play around with, how do I do both at the same time?
How do I take care of everybody?
How do I take care of everybody and let them know that I'm okay?
Right.
And it's interesting, like when you talk about people, not a dry eye in the house. I mean, you sang some songs last night and we were crying and you were not. And it made me realize, no, you're in.
I'm okay.
I'm okay and I'm in control here. I'm still here to sing this song, and I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to take care of the music.
Right.
Which is very, you know, I was I have trouble sometimes getting through powerful music without
Yeah.
losing myself.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is a skill.
I mean, it is a skill that I have slowly developed, and in this most recent loss of my husband, Bob, which was just weeks ago. December 9th, conversations I had with him, both times with both of my husbands, they were very conscious right before they died and very, very much aware of the bigness of it and the wonder of it. And he's like, I'm not here to put pressure on you to keep doing your shows, but you just need to get quiet and go inside and ask yourself, can I do this?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is maybe or yes, I want you to try, because it's what you do.
Yeah.
And the way he said that was like, it's what you do, and I thought, okay. And I said, the worst thing that could happen is you wobble, you might cry, you might fall apart a little bit. There are people who will receive that as an incredibly healing experience for them.
Yes.
If you want to just turn it around and think, what good am I doing if I'm up there crying? Well, you're doing good even if you're doing that.
Yes.
The first concert I did after Bob died was on the 15th of December, so it was just a few days. And a friend of mine, Lydia Hutchinson, who I work with and does these wonderful workshops, she suggested, because I was still a little, I don't know how to talk about it. I don't want to start my show by saying, hey, here I am, my husband died, and I didn't want to not say that early on in the show, because it was like the elephant in the room, in my head. She said, why don't we just have you write it out in a lovely little paragraph or two, and we'll make some printouts. And as people come into the theater, we'll hand them to them. So the people sitting in front of you will all know the situation in your own words, but you don't have to say it. And I thought, oh my God. And I remember doing these 3 little nights with Dar Williams here, thinking, oh, I don't have my hand out. How am I going to do this?
Oh.
And last night was only my second time,
Yeah.
And I've just been going like, please help me not make a fool of myself as I try to find a way to put this into words with a sense that I'm going to be okay. But the big piece, and this is the thing I didn't have when I was at the Bluebird and my husband was getting mad at me, I had written a song that helped people really open up and cry, but I wasn't okay if I made them cry. It made me feel guilty that I made them cry. I didn't want them to think I was trying to manipulate them. So by making a joke at the end of it, somehow, which was a really bad move because it didn't fix this problem at all.
Yeah.
It was my own uncomfortableness with having made them cry and almost wanting to apologize to them. But what I did is I insulted them.
Yes.
But anyway,
and stayed uncomfortable, as
Right.
opposed to what I saw you do, which is I'm comfortable with this reality,
Right.
and acknowledging it and being in this space,
Yes.
so you can be comfortable,
And you can cry.
and you can
I'll
cry.
be fine. You can cry or not cry.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it should be,
Yeah.
when I hear people sing with emotion that's an overlay of emotion,
Yes.
that's like, and here's what you're supposed to do
Yes.
now. I don't like that kind of singing. I'm always moved by people who understate.
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of incredibly powerful singers that put a lot of power in their voice, and that's a different stylistic thing. I'm not talking about that. But especially if you have a song like Sand and Water, if I go all alone, if I get that, here's how you're supposed to feel when you sing this song, that to me is absolutely stops the energy of of whatever healing should happen. Like Rodney Crowell said, it's not my business. Who
That's
needs
right.
to hear it? Who doesn't need to hear it?
That's right.
And I know that I'm going to deliver a song that's well written and is enjoyable to hear. And if it doesn't make you cry because you don't feel sad about anything, that's absolutely fine.
Well, people process things different too. I mean, you also, from a craft point of view, you're just dealing with. I was also just dealing with the craft of the song. What a fucking great song.
And the funny thing is when I wrote, and the other weird thing about my writing is I write from the sound of the melody through the vowels. So I had, if you heard my initial work tape, I was going, I don't wanna. I knew it was an O, and I knew it was 3 of them. And I didn't mean for this to be what happened.
Yeah.
But the songs organize themselves. I think if we open to this creative flow and we say, I'm here, use me, bring it on, let me help you figure out what we're trying to say here.
Yes.
Magical things organize themselves.
Yes.
I didn't go, if I do that 3 times, then the person who's not wanting to feel it, not wanting to feel it. And then the third time you get to All Alone, it just gets, it's like a great massage therapist will start slow. And then the next time they come to that spot, they're going to go deeper. And that's what that melody does. But I didn't make that. I didn't go, I think I'll do that.
Well,
it did it by itself.
This speaks to a question of universal or natural structure, right? Because, I mean, when you say things will organize themselves, I think part of what's happening is there is structure, whether or not it's in the universe or it's just what humans like. I mean, you can sort of get as deep as you want to with it, but there are certain patterns that we respond to, like say something twice and then the third time change it. Set up an expectation and then subvert or vary the expectation. We may not be aware that we like it, but we like that.
Right.
We like that.
Right.
We really like that. You know, what I love hearing you say is you could be so coherent. The things that you find yourself saying could be so beautifully organized, and you almost feel like
I had nothing to do
you
with
didn't
it.
have anything to
No,
do with it.
I promise you I had nothing to do with it. When I sang Sand and Water for Rodney and he said, look at this line.
Yeah.
Solid stone is just sand and water and 1,000,000 years gone by. I don't think that even makes any sense. I didn't get that line. He goes, well, 2 weeks from now, when you're on your way to the dentist office, you're going to be at a red light.
Yeah.
Let me know when you get it, because it's fucking brilliant, right? About 4 weeks later, I was literally in the frozen food section, and I went, oh, I get it. It's like I'm standing in front of a boulder, which is called the grief of this. Mm-hmm. And I'm being told I can't go around it, and I can't go under it, and I can't go over it. I have to go through it. Mm-hmm. The only way to get through solid stone is if it melts back down into sand, and then I can walk over it.
And it's just made, I mean, I took it as it's just made out of the stuff that you can walk on. It's not made out of anything else. It's just sand.
It's
just
transformation,
sand and water.
right? So solid stone is the same thing as sand and water. Add 1,000,000 years, and it turns into a stone. That's another way to look at it. You know, so many lines of songs that I wrote that are the best lines like that where I go, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't write it. I just wrote it down.
There is a sense, even in your writing, of the divine. I mean, you are willing
not only
to
in
talk
my writing,
about it.
in this conversation, in everything happening around us. I feel I have a front row seat to the divine, especially amplified by the losses that I've had and the way that I've been given a way through it. Like I'm not worried about myself. I'm absolutely hit with these waves of sadness that just put me on the floor. But they're waves. I'm not afraid of them. I'm like, oh, I'm going to cry now. I'll be back in about 10 minutes, you know. If you go to YouTube and you put in sand geometry, there are millions of these YouTube videos, okay? There's a flat metal plate. You've probably seen this. Flat metal plate. You put salt or sand on it. They put a tone into it, frequencies. As soon as you put 440 into it, it turns in, the sand turns into geometric shapes of one kind. You change the note on it, it goes
Different
to another shape. And that, to me, I love to show that to my friends who are atheists because it doesn't matter what you call your God. It doesn't matter what religion or culture you're from. That is divine. That's divine organization. Everything is completely in order, even in the midst and out of the chaos. And that's why my first drafts look like somebody threw up on the page. There's things upside down and there's writing backwards and forwards. And I know in there a song is forming itself. And my job is to pick through it and try to get it in the best shape I can with my analytical skills and my song craft skills, which you can sharpen. But if you don't give yourself time to walk around in the woods, or you don't give yourself a time not scrolling, death scrolling on your phone, which, you know, we're all susceptible to.
Years ago, I interviewed a brilliant arranger and musician, Gil Goldstein, who basically talked about how the overtone series and the Fibonacci sequence and these naturally occurring patterns are kind of his religion. Yeah. You know?
To me, all creativity, all forms of that, chaos or divine order is all God breathing. Yeah. Just God breathing, like this giant breathing, expanding thing that organizes itself. So when I feel stuck with a song, I mean, I can be stuck sometimes for years trying to get one word. There's a song on my new record called With Time, which is, I think, my favorite song on the record, and it's the word with. I had before time, through time, in time. I had every, and it was just the most natural, obvious thing. And it just, for some reason, took me 4 years of batting my head against the wall till this just went dink. Here it is. And all the thing wrote itself from there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know why it takes 4 years sometimes.
When the world makes me cry, there's a calm in the eye of the storm, keeps me from running scared, even though life's unfair. It's beautiful, it's magical, whatever comes, whatever goes with time.
Do you
finish everything or
Eventually, I hope before I die, I'll finish everything that I'm excited about. But I mean, I have probably 130 half-written songs, give or take 50.
And do you walk them into co-writes? Like, is that the kind of stuff
No.
that you bring it? No.
Not usually. I might with one person or two people in the course of my career. But when I write with somebody else, I like to start fresh.
Yeah.
I like to see what
Even a
chemistry
seed? Do you have
allows.
a seed? Nothing.
I can, or they'll have an idea. Usually if I have a seed, I've already decided I want to write it. It's weird. It's like if I have an idea, if an idea pops into my head as we're talking,
Yeah.
then it's our idea.
Yeah.
And if it's my idea, then I start becoming, well, now I want to be careful how that gets written because I want to make sure. And I've written with David Wilcox. I don't know if you know David Wilcox. He's a fantastic songwriter. You should, he'd be a great person to interview because he's way out there. He's really fun to talk to. And David and I were both at a writer's, kind of an artist colony at the same time. And he heard me playing this melody. Deeper Still is the name of the song. And I'd had this melody for 2 years, and I had the first 4 lines of the first verse. In the tears you gave to me, I found a river to an ocean, a concrete sky and a stone cold sea. I can't remember. Anyway, it's a song about forgiveness. And he was like, literally came up to me, and I'd met him before. We'd done some shows years before. We hadn't seen him in a long time. He literally crouched down at the piano. He said, I will do anything to write this song with you. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. This is something, I have to write it by myself. He's like, no, just give me a chance. Let me just convince you that, I could work on it today, because we were there to write by ourselves. And I was like, David, I just think we'd end up not being friends after I put you through whatever the hell I'm going to put. He goes, no, I would totally give me a day. He was really like, I know I'm supposed to write the song with you. So I said, I'll get, okay, but I was very like, oh God, And the first thing he did was take a legal pad and sit there and go, okay, let's just tell me some words you like. And I thought, oh, this is very cerebral. I don't write this way. He goes, just tell me some words you like the sound of. And I'm like, okay, first thing that popped in my word, diamond. Another word, echo. He goes, diamond, echo. Ooh, I like those together. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Diamonds don't echo. And he goes, well, So fast forward to the end of the second day of writing the song. And he's a great songwriter. I love and appreciate and respect his songwriting so much. But I just thought, oh boy, this is going to be a different thing than the one that I think I was going to write by myself. And I just let go and let go and let go. And I was quite happy with where we were going. And then when, then I was really happy with where we were going, and we worked on it really hard.
Yeah.
And then with the last verse, what made me really realize I did the right thing and like it wouldn't have ever happened that way is there's this line that says, whatever you put into love, you get back.
Yeah.
Is basically the idea of the song. And there's like a silver coin rings down the well. Like if you put money into a well and you make a wish, a silver coin rings down that well. You can never give too much. A diamond echoes deeper still, and you always have what you gave to love. And I'm like, oh my God, we got diamond echo in there.
A diamond echoes deeper still, and you'll always have what you gave to love.
I think to the universe, I'm like one of those guys that has to be just totally have it proven to me. Like it hits me over the head, like, you know, yep, this was supposed to happen. And I just find divinity is just literally everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's in that glass of water. It's like evaporating. Things are happening and we're just not.
But you can tune into it.
I am tuned into it. I'm
it's
like
happening.
buzzing.
We're often not tuned into it, but if you choose to tune into it, if you choose into the cheese sandwich that turns into mold, if you choose to tune into the music that's around us, or the messages that are around us, or the shapes that are around us, the form that's around us.
Yeah, and I think going through this, you know, most recent last several weeks and the intensity of that, I was doing a tour in the UK, 5-week tour of the UK. It was wonderful, great, successful, nice crowds. And the last night of the last show, I got a text from my husband, Bob. And, you know, he'd been dealing with leukemia since 2017, coming into remission and having relapses and stuff. And he'd been having a hard time, lots of pain and discomfort. And I got this text from him and he basically said, "Is this your last show?" And I thought, that's weird. He would ask me that. I said, yeah. And he goes, "Well, when you get to the hotel, just, you know, FaceTime me." And then he told me out of the blue, he said, they've given me 2 weeks to live. And I mean, it was just like, what? And so I flew home and, you know, then the next, he was like, he had 3.5 weeks, but that was an incredibly intense time. You know, I'm so grateful for how he came through that and the way that he did it and how generously and beautifully he opened his heart to so many people and friends. And I mean, people are still going, oh my God. I mean, he's a psychologist. Every one of his clients he met with personally and said goodbye. And the hospice was incredible because they gave him the ability they gave him steroids and methadone. And those two medicines together gave him energy and kept his head clear and kept him out of pain. So he had about 2 weeks where he was just going, this is better than I've felt in weeks.
I've heard that.
Too bad you can't do this
all the time.
Infinitely. Yeah. I mean, you can see why people get hooked on drugs.
Yeah.
Coming off of all of that, I'm still sort of reverberating from the majesty of how that happened, you know. And then, you know, the loss is also just a big, huge other layer, you know, that hits me completely at random times. And I think this is true for people who have gone through really difficult stuff. And if you haven't, stay tuned. So it's not like nobody's going to have that happen to them at some point. You know, we're all going to go through difficult stuff. And it's interesting. I read a lot of books by a guy named Stephen Levine, who wrote a lot about death and dying. And he said one thing that was really powerful, that, you know, people will touch you with fear or with empathy. And fear is usually they're just afraid. Like if they'll say, like, I'm also a breast cancer survivor. And, you know, people would say, oh, I'm so glad that didn't happen to me. Good thing it doesn't happen to me. Like they're saying to the universe, I can't handle it. She's good. She's amazing. Good. She's super brave, you know. And when somebody says, oh, you're so brave, you went through breast cancer, it's like, I didn't volunteer.
Yeah. But again, you know, I read, this is what I wanted to bring this up. I read that when you acknowledge that on the stage, that you'll also, or that your joke for years was then to turn around and tell the audience, make sure somebody fills you up at least once a month.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, to make it okay that we're talking about this.
Yeah.
And to make it part of the most natural conversation that we could be having.
Yeah, and I'd say, like, if you don't feel comfortable feeling yourself up, I'm sure you can find a volunteer because people love breasts. Yeah. And they love chests. So just ask around, you know. That's one of those things that it gave me great joy to feel like somebody heard me and didn't have the same experience I had, which was being misdiagnosed for 2 years and, you know, could have avoided some of the medicines I ended up having to take. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the music, it's just the music is, even on this new record, which is called Crazy Town, and we were literally recording it at the end of the recording of all the tracks within a week, the pandemic hit. But if you listen through those songs, you would swear that I wrote this as a whole collection of songs about coming through the pandemic. So again, you know, it happened with breast cancer too. I was on my last day of mixing in the year 2000, and the name of the record was Deeper Still, named after that song I wrote with David. And I found out I had stage 2 breast cancer, and I had to have a lumpectomy and chemo and radiation. And so I didn't put the record out for another year, but it was already done. And then when I put the record out, people said, she wrote the most amazing songs about going through breast cancer. I'm like, nope, I preceded that.
There's a light in the darkness, and the blood
I started saying that last year too. I put out a record during COVID that half of it had been written before COVID, and everybody called it my COVID record. And ultimately, I ended up saying the same thing. The songs that you think are about that were written right before COVID, and it really did make me start to believe that our job is to tune into something. And if we, in our particular way of tuning in, as you say, is specific and unique to us, no one else will tune into the frequency in quite the same way, or they won't make the same thing.
You're the portal of that moment.
But I can't explain why I wrote that stuff right before.
Yeah.
That feels more appropriate given what happened, or makes sense somehow given what happened after the fact. So I mean, I've just touched it. I've just tasted it a little bit, and I came to the same conclusion that all you can do is just open yourself to it.
Yeah, and the thing is as the more you are open to and curious about it and waiting to hear it, as opposed to your brain saying, now what am I going to write today, Mr. Know-It-All brain, that I'm always dealing with it because mine's very noisy. My know-it-all brain just wants to finish it and name it and figure it out. And I got to get that guy off doing something else. But being able to sort of be in that sort of joyful hunting and gathering part of the childlike creative flow, I'll write down the weirdest stuff. I mean, the weirdest lines. When we were writing This Kiss, I was writing with Annie Roboff and Robin Lerner. We had this great first verse that Annie written a lot of that.
Was it any kind of brief? Was it for Faith Hill? Did you know you were writing for somebody?
Faith didn't cut it for like a year and a half after we wrote it. I mean, it was like, that's one of those songs. Everybody got it pitched to them and nobody cut it. And then all of a sudden.
So that was just an afternoon you walked in and wrote a song?
No, we wrote the song in a couple of days, a couple of sessions. Annie had written a lot of the really hooky stuff in that first verse and a lot of the melody. Really, she wrote a great deal of the melody. But we had like great first verse, great chorus, and then we're sitting there with the dreaded have to write the second verse where you got to say something different, but it's got to still relate to the song. And if you've written a really great song, by the time you get to the end of the first chorus, it already feels complete.
Yeah.
And then the hard part about the second verse, it has to go somewhere from there. So what I do in a situation like that is because I love the first part, I'll just sing through it and then just launch my voice into some nonsense syllables that makes no sense. And sometimes it'll be blah, 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 blah,
Mm-hmm.
And so I blurted out, Cleopatra was a snowflake. Cleopatra was a snowflake. Da, 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 da. And then they both looked at me and went, no. We're not putting Cleopatra in the song. And I'm like, I know, but there's a reason I said that. And they're like, no, there's not. That's stupid. We're not doing that. And I kept going, Cleopatra was a snowflake. It feels like that. Cleopatra was a snowflake. Cleopatra had a snowflake. And they're like, we're going to lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And they left me there. And they come back 20 minutes later. Cleopatra and a snowflake.
Mm-hmm.
And Annie got right up in my face and she said, we are not using Disney characters in this song. And I thought, Disney? Wait, hold on. Cleopatra wasn't Disney. Disney. And I'm thinking, Cinderella said to Snow White. And then I realized, oh my God, Cinderella said to Snow White, how does love get so off course? And then we wrote the second verse very quickly because it was like, now we have like Cinderella's talking to Snow White going, how does this get so crazy?
Yeah.
And which is really funny.
Yes.
And then, the bridge was like, boo, 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 boo. We got unstuck.
Cinderella said to Snow White, how does love get so off course? Oh, all I wanted was a white knight with a good heart, soft touch, fast horse. Ride me off into the sunset, baby, I'm forever yours. It's the way you love me, it's a feeling like this. It's centrifugal motion, it's perpetual bliss. It's that pivotal moment, it's unthinkable. This kiss.
It's funny, though, because you had Snowflake.
Yeah, because
it gave you Snow White.
Somebody from the other side of Creative Flow is helping me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I truly believe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not alone. You're not alone. We're not alone in this. We have a collective, I believe, a collective wisdom. And, anybody that's crossed over to the other side is part of that.
Is in there.
John Prine, bring it on, baby. Anything you want me to say, just come on.
Well, I think, and I know you talked last night about a song that you wrote trying to channel John Prine.
Yeah.
I thought, listening to a bunch of your music over the last couple of days, that some people are more naturally in tune to the language and the building blocks of writing. And as you say, it can be cultivated, it can be studied, it can be improved upon. But you can also just tell, and I've run into a handful of people like this where it's like everything that went in stayed in. You know what I mean? Every sound you heard is still kind of in there and available to be, or what you would say is, well, it's maybe I haven't even heard it before. Maybe it's just moving through me. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with me. But I just hear, I hear all the way the Beatles are getting shaken up on this record, but coming back out through you, like certainly the first tune is like,
we're so influenced by that. Yeah, absolutely.
All around the world today is a tidal wave of tears. It's a piece of cake. It can only get better. Let the hurdy-gurdy play. It's a wonder that we're here. We got rules to break and mistakes to make. Take a leap of faith all around the world.
These are the ingredients we cook with, We're making a new thing, but we all kind of have these ingredients, and you've got a lot of song ingredients that you've gathered over.
And I think, too, you think about people who love music and have soaked in a lot of music, and then they go to become a songwriter, and I think you can become better at recognizing what to grab and work with and how to play with it and how to construct it. Like, you can follow the directions in Legos, or you can just make some shit up with Legos that nobody's ever seen before. And I kind of love both worlds, but I'm not a direction follower kind of thing. But I love feeling the connection to things that have influenced me. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And, there's a part of me that, would love to make a jazz record. There's a part of me that also says, that's a territory that I would have to be very apologetic about on the front end because I'm not knowledgeable, but it would be fun to do, and nobody's gonna, like I did a record that's never been released that's all in Sanskrit. I'll send it to you. It's really cool.
Wow.
I did it for Deepak Chopra for a yoga tape.
Yeah.
And I collaborated with a guy named Kirby Shellstad, who's a fantastic musician in Nashville, and they're beautiful chants, and they're layered, and they're kind of meditative, and at some point I'll put it out because it's really cool. I did the Prism album, which is in 9 different languages, and took me 10 years to do. Did that children's album on astronomy. I've just had this really wanderlust about trying different things just because I want to try it, because I think it'd be fun, and be interesting.
How do you just stay motivated to do all that stuff? Like, what's driving you to keep? You can't stop.
I'll run out of time before I run out of wanting to do it. I find it fascinating. If I had to do the same kind of record over and over again, I think I would become very bored, and I would feel very redundant. Even this record has its own flavor that's not like anything else I've ever done. It's very live band kind of, and Ray Kennedy, who's just an absolute genius in the studio. I really want to do a proper children's album. I've got all these songs I wrote with my son when he was in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. They're really entertaining, I have them all. I just have to find the time to put it together. So I want to do a record that's all vocals, no words, and long chords that barely move, so that you would just put it on, like, they have these binaural beats and stuff. Like I might collaborate with someone that puts like underneath that, but just really, really still. Yeah. Because I have ADHD, and I'm like working on trying to get to sleep and stuff, and I'm thinking it could just be one note. And there are some amazing recordings that go on for 8 hours, just like, ooh. That.
I know we're scratching the surface. I know you have such a extremely deep and vast and long,
I can go on
storied
forever.
career.
Just ask me about me. I can go on forever.
But I do want to say how much fun it is to get to talk to you a little bit.
Well, it's so great because I've been a fan of yours, and I've been loving your podcast, your conversations. I love the opportunity to go in depth on some of the stuff that's all around us, and we're like steeped in this mystery. And life to me is mystery school. It just really is. And how it's something that most every human, if you ease them into the conversation in the right way, depending on who they are, they're fascinated to go there. They're like, that gets them awake,
Yes.
it's really interesting. And anyway, the bottom line is I think we're all being very well cared for and looked after, even though it looks like a freaking mess down here a lot of the time.
Well, Beth, I think you are helping us look after ourselves through your work.
I hope so.
And so thank you for that. And I am really sorry for your recent loss. And I'm so grateful and thankful that you did choose to come out and perform this week and this month and to talk to me today.
Well, I'm so glad to finally get to sit in this sacred room with you, and maybe next time we'll play some music together.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. There she was, my friends, Beth Nielsen Chapman. What a story, what a beautiful soul, and what a hell of a songwriter. I decided to take her advice and to write some new verses to Yesterday. Not easy, but here it is. Paul's first verse and bridge, my second and third verses.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it seems as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Looking back, I can see the wheels come off the track. But in the moment we don't think like that. It only happens looking back. Why she had to go, I don't know. She wouldn't say. I said something wrong, now I long for yesterday. Yesterday, I don't know why I kept my heart at bay. I wish I could have found another way to show my love. Yesterday, to show my love. Yesterday.
I'll be back again in your headspace before you know it. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.
This has been a WBGO Studios production. To learn more about WBGO Studios' award-winning podcasts, special concerts, live streams, and more, visit wbgo.org/studios.